Good morning, everyone. My name is Lucy Anderson. I am the director of our product claims certification programs here at SCS, and I am going to be introducing you to our plant-based standard today. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and enter them in the questions section, and I will answer all questions at the end. If we run out of time and I'm unable to get through everything, we'll be sure to follow up with you after. And tomorrow you will all be receiving a copy of the recording. So yes, this is recorded, and yes, you will receive a copy tomorrow. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to cover today a little bit about SCS Global Services and who we are, and then move on to why you would want to get SCS plant-based certified. Go into some basics of the standard and the certification process, and then leave time for questions. Okay, so a little bit about SCS. So we do all different types of third-party environmentally and sustainability certifications. We also do standards development, and we also do consulting. We have all different types of clients, from governmental organization, non-governmental organization, food manufacturers and producers, and community stakeholders. We do primarily auditing and inspection, as well as verification and certification, training, standards development, and consulting work. We currently have over 30,000 certifications out there. So diving into our food and agriculture division a little bit more, these top certifications, in addition to plant-based on the top row, are part of our product claims certification group. So this means you can bundle your plant-based certification very easily. You'll have one point of contact as your coordinator and one auditor with any of these certifications that are up here on the top row. But here's just some examples of other types of food safety services and other certifications that we do offer in the food and agriculture sector. This is not a comprehensive slide, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of other certifications that we offer and that we can bundle with your plant-based certification. Okay, so why would you want to get certified? So the US plant-based market has grown drastically in the past couple of years. From 2018 to 2021, it grew from 4.8 billion to 7.4 billion. I don't have the number yet. This data is from SPINS. I don't have the number yet for 2022, but it is projected to be much higher than 7.4 billion. So we are seeing substantial growth year over year in the US plant-based market. The global market is also seeing an increase as well. And just a couple examples of this. So animal-based milk sales actually decreased in 2021, but plant-based milk sales increased in 2021. And if you look at the time span of 2018 to 2021, plant-based meat sales grew at 3 times the pace of animal-derived meat sales. And it's estimated that at least 40% of consumers purchased plant-based meat or dairy products. So we're seeing significant growth in this industry, significant funding in this industry. And with this growth in funding, we're seeing more quote-unquote realistic products. So alternative meat and dairy products are getting increasingly difficult to distinguish from animal-derived products. You're no longer seeing just chickpea veggie burgers versus a hamburger. You're now seeing products that look and taste like animal-derived inputs that are actually not animal-derived. And so, in addition to being able to distinguish these in the supply chain, we want to make sure that every step in the supply chain is evaluated, so that we're looking up and seeing, okay, is there, a lot of these are complex formulated products. And so we just don't want to look at just the ingredients list. We want to make sure every step in the supply chain and the manufacturing process has been evaluated and is free of animal-derived inputs and products. In addition, regulation that's currently out there and FDA guidance is very limited and very murky for self-made animal-derived alternative claims, plant-based claims, things like that. So you're seeing a lot of claims out there that are fully unregulated. No one's quite sure what they mean. And so certification really gives transparency into exactly what's in a product, exactly, that it met this set of criteria. And in the case of, our SCS plant-based standard, that this is in fact free from animal-derived inputs at every step in the supply chain and the facility has been evaluated. Oops. Okay, so looking at the basics of the standard, the goal of this is to help consumers make agile, safe, and informed purchasing decisions when looking for plant-based products. So we want you to be able to walk into your local grocery store or wherever and say, okay, this product is plant-based and I don't know if this product is because it's not certified. So we want to provide that level of transparency so that consumers are enabled to make the purchasing decisions that are important to them. And our definition of plant-based is not necessarily consistent with every other definition of plant-based out there. So as I mentioned before, the regulations are a little bit murky. Other certifications out there, things are not always clear exactly what things mean. So in the SCS plant-based certification, there are no animal-derived inputs allowed at any step in the supply chain. So this includes processing aids, this includes additives, this includes flavors, this includes added vitamins. No animal-derived inputs can be used at any stage. So we have two categories. One is for products for human and pet consumption, and those require that a minimum of 95% of plant-derived inputs in these products. In body care products, so things like shampoos, body lotions, things that are topically applied, we require that those are a minimum 50% of plant-derived inputs. And so that remaining less than 5% in the products for human and pet consumption, and that remaining less than 50% in the body care products cannot be animal derived. And again, this does include additives, processing aids, and things like that. And so the production facility is under review to ensure integrity in the manufacturing process. There's no cross-contamination, ingredients are adequately segregated, and measures are in place to avoid any accidental exposure to animal-derived inputs. So just a little bit about SCS versus other plant-based standards that may be out there. So this standard is obviously created and maintained by SCS Global Services, and we really aim to hold companies to a high standard with this certification. So not every single plant-based certification out there does any type of facility evaluation. Some have a very limited evaluation, some have no facility evaluation, but we believe you can't really claim a product is plant-based just based on that ingredients list on the finished good, CPG product. We want the facility to be evaluated and make sure there are no sources of potential contamination. If someone is processing products on the same line that handles milk or meat, we want to make sure that there's adequate clean out and sanitation and segregation and sequencing to ensure that this product is sufficiently separated from any potential sources of contaminations. Our 95% threshold is higher than some of the other thresholds that are out there. Again, this is not speaking for every single plant-based standard out there, but there are some standards that have a less than 95% threshold. And in our standard, no inputs are out of scope. So again, processing aids, additives, vitamins, flavors, these are all things that must go through the evaluation process, and we will get confirmation that no animal-derived inputs were used at any step in the supply chain in order for a product to be eligible for certification. Another advantage of the SCS plant-based standard, as I mentioned before, is the opportunity to bundle. So these are some of the very commonly bundled services we can provide with plant-based. So we'll give you one point of contact to kind of work through the process with, and one auditor for any combination of these services. So that's definitely an advantage of working with SCS versus some of the other plant-based certifications that are out there. So to talk a little bit about eligibility, it's very broad who can apply and get certified. So we allow both brand owners as well as manufacturers to be the ones certified and hold that certificate. So if you have a co-packer that produces your product, but you own the brand, you are eligible for certification. Of course, co-packer or contract manufacturer participation is mandatory. So we will need your facility to be involved because, as I mentioned before, we have that facility review component. So we really want to make sure they're doing everything in a compliant manner. So we will need their involvement in the process, but you as the brand owner are eligible for certification. Similarly, if you are a manufacturer producing into brands for which you don't own, you are also eligible, for certification. So you will be able to hold and maintain that certification for multiple brands into which you produce and be able to sell this as an add-on service to future potential clients as well. Products can be both produced and or sold anywhere in the world, so there are no geographical constraints with plant-based certification. So going into what types, whoops, sorry about that. For some reason it, okay, so what types of products can be certified? So processed foods are allowed to be certified, ingredients are allowed to be certified, supplements and homeopathic remedies, goods for human use that are topically applied, and pet foods for domestic animals are all eligible. One important thing to note is that only items for which alternatives contain animal-derived inputs are eligible for certification. So we want the standard to have integrity, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but we don't want, a bag of spinach or a bunch of carrots to be eligible for plant-based certification, because those are so obviously plant-based and there is no potential meat-derived carrot on the market. So we want to make sure that our certification is used in a situation in which it is providing value and not used to confuse consumers, not used on raw vegetables of things that are not, animal derived or, it doesn't have any animal derived inputs. And so kind of getting into this a little bit further, we have specific product categories that are not allowed to be certified. So things like raw, frozen, freeze-dried fruit and vegetables are ineligible for certification. And products that do not have alternatives that may contain animal-derived inputs are not eligible. Also, products that contain the language may contain a specific animal-derived ingredient on the packaging are not eligible. So if you say may contain milk on your packaging of your plant-based product, it is not eligible for certification. Generally, if you are passing the facility compliance, you're likely meeting the FDA guidelines where you would not have to put this statement on your packaging. But if you wish to push this statement on your packaging regardless, you are not eligible for SCS plant-based certification. And then medicine and drugs and controlled substances are also not eligible for certification. So here's a list of some commonly animal-derived inputs, obviously things like meat and dairy derivatives like milk, yogurt, cheese, butter, whey, things like that are pretty obviously animal-derived. But I think an important thing to note is that we consider insect-derived inputs as animal-derived as well. So honey, pollen, beeswax, royal jelly, things like shellac, things like cochineal, those types of ingredients, as they are insect-derived, are not eligible to be used in plant-based certified products. Other commonly used ingredients that we see that sometimes people are unaware of, collagen is a big one that's relatively common now in a lot of products that we see. Rennet is common. You see that sometimes even in non-dairy cheese because it's used to coagulate the cheese or kind of thicken and hold together the cheese. Casein is a pretty common one that's actually derived from milk, and you'll see casein and derivatives used in some products that you might even think are plant-based, but this is a pretty common one of something that is plant-based, or sorry, that is animal-derived that people might not know about. Things like gelatin, again, shellac, animal fats, glycerin, lactic acid, stearic acid, and even some vitamins may be animal-derived. I did asterisk these because there are relatively common versions of these inputs that are not animal-derived. So, it really does depend, and this is why we look up the supply chain to ingredient suppliers to gather this information, because there is a lot of variability in how things are made. And here are some examples of things that you might think are relatively obviously plant-based, but in fact often contain animal-derived inputs, additives, or processing aids. So wine and beer, for example, a lot of times fining agents, so these are like clarifying agents for the wine and beer used in production, are often made from blood and bone marrow, casein, egg albumin, things like that. Even things labeled as non-dairy creamers often contain sodium caseinate, which is a derivative of casein, which actually is derived from milk. So you have to be careful looking at, even things that advertise as non-dairy or things that advertise as veggie. Veggie burgers, just because they say veggie burger does not mean they are entirely plant-based. They could contain eggs or other ingredients that are animal-derived. Foods that are dyed red. So cochineal, or also known as carmine, is derived from this red scale insect, and that is very often used as a red dye in specific foods. And so, per our standard, that's considered an animal-derived input and would be ineligible. Candy can sometimes contain things like gelatin. It can contain that red color. Even sugar can be processed using bone char in the filtration. So I'm not saying all of these, ingredients always contain animal-derived inputs, but just that it is possible. And that's why we go every step up the supply chain, because we really want to make sure. Cereal can contain, sometimes a frosted yogurt or a honey input, something like that. And also sometimes, vitamins, flavors, things like that. A lot of cereals have added vitamins, and some of those could be animal-derived. So do these ingredients or these products contain animal-derived inputs? The answer is a resounding maybe, but we need to do that thorough evaluation to find out, and that's why we do go to every step in the supply chain to really determine. So just to recap on formulation review, I know we went over this a little bit more, but kind of diving in here. So products for human or animal consumption have a minimum 95% plant-derived ingredients, and that remaining less than 5% cannot be animal-derived. So that leaves an exception for things like minerals or baking soda, something like that, something that's not animal-derived but also not plant-derived. It's important to note that these calculations do exclude water and salt. So we take the water and salt out, and then we evaluate your ingredients using that kind of reduced percentage. And for body care products, we have that minimum 50% plant-derived ingredients, and the remaining less than 50% cannot be from anything animal-derived. And just to reiterate, processing aids, additives, vitamins, and flavors are all considered in scope. And a quick note on algae, seaweed, fungi, and microbially derived ingredients. So we consider all of these to fall within the plant-derived kind of category. So these would fall into that 95% threshold. So think things like seaweed or mushrooms or nutritional yeast. Although these taxonomically are not considered to be plants, for the purpose of the standard, we are allowing these to be within that kind of plant-derived category. So if you are using seaweed, that will count, within your 95% threshold. That will not be in that less than 5% allowance. So the seaweed, will fall within that. The algae will fall within that. Mushrooms will fall as part of that 95%. Okay, and looking briefly at the facility review, so we do focus on critical control points because every facility is different. So we require that you identify any potential risks of animal-derived input contamination, and we make sure that you have measures in place, or your contract manufacturer, if you are a brand owner, has measures in place to ensure that animal-derived inputs are not introduced throughout the production process. So we'll want to make sure you have a supplier approval program. We'll want to make sure you have GMPs in place. You'll want to make sure when you're receiving ingredients, that you actually received the plant-derived milk alternative, as opposed to accidentally, if the supplier sent you the wrong bag of, dairy, that's maybe not the best example, but, making sure that you have checks and measures in place to ensure that at any point where an animal-derived input risk of a contamination is identified, that you have measures in place to preserve the integrity of your product. So we'll look for, if your facility is also handling animal-derived inputs, we're going to be looking at segregation and storage of ingredients, sanitation and clean out of any shared equipment, GMPs and training of staff, traceability through your system, making sure you have internal audits and measures for continuous improvement in place, and that handling suspected contamination is in effect in your facility, and you have ways to handle either contamination or suspected contamination. And just a quick overview of our facility and audit types. So we have two types of audits. There are desk audits and there are inspections, and I'll explain each of these to you. So you are eligible for a desk audit if the production facility does not handle any animal-derived inputs, or if the facility does handle animal-derived inputs, they are part of an existing allergen control program. So this will apply to most things like milk, fish. Those are part of the big 9 allergens. So if your facility is handling these ingredients outside of the products that are going to be plant-based certified, and they are part of an allergen control program, you will be eligible for a desk audit. You will require an inspection if the facility handles animal-derived inputs that are not part of an allergen control program. So things like meat and honey are not necessarily required to be part of an allergen control program. So you might not see that as often. If the facility decides to add in, honey to their allergen control program and handle it, in this similar way that they would handle allergens, then that would make you eligible for a desk audit. So depending on involvement from your facility and how they want to handle potential sources of contamination will dictate the type of audit that is required. So the desk audit will be completed remotely via email each year. The inspection will alternate between virtual and on-site annually. And the reason we have these different types of audits is because we did a pretty thorough risk analysis on threats to contamination. And so, if there's less of a risk, we want to save you time and save you money and make the process more achievable if the risk is lower. And so that's why we have desk audits. And then with the inspection, with the pandemic, we were able to create pretty thorough and robust virtual on-site tools to help us evaluate facilities appropriately. And so we are able to offer on-sites only every other year and do the alternative years as virtual inspections, which will save money given the cost of travel fees these days. Okay, and that's all I have for you today. Definitely feel free to leave any questions you have. And I have Ned Hallaby's information here. He is our Director of Sales and Marketing for our product claims program. So this includes plant-based as well as non-GMO project, USDA organic, SCS gluten-free, and SCS pesticide residue-free. So if you have questions that are not answered today or information about getting started, if you would like a free price quote, please feel free to contact Ned at his email and phone number are listed here. And he would be happy to speak with you and answer your questions and help you get started. And in the meantime, I can answer any questions that have come up. Okay, can you give examples of products that have animal-derived alternatives? So I think this is probably referring to how I said before, that only products with animal-derived for which alternatives may contain animal-derived inputs are eligible for certification. So there's a lot of products that are eligible given the use of animal-derived inputs today. So obviously this expands beyond things like alternative meat, alternative cheese, those types of products. Things like soup mixes, those are eligible. Broths are eligible. Cereals, granola bars, protein powders, all different types of snack products would be eligible. A lot of processed packaged goods are going to be eligible. Really, the things we're trying to avoid are the, items found in a produce section, though things like bag salads that contain additives and inclusions and or dressing packets, those would be eligible because alternatives do contain animal-derived inputs. Okay. Can you say more about the allergen control program that would allow a facility with animal products to have a virtual or desk audit each year? Sure. So allergen control, as many of you probably know, there's kind of the big 9 allergens established by the FDA. So these are things that are required to be labeled on packaging. So milk, eggs, fish, crustaceans, those are 4 of the big ones that would apply to animal-derived inputs. So these are required to be labeled as allergens per the FDA. And because of this, a lot of facilities, most if not all facilities that handle this, will have an allergen control program in place if they are handling these allergens. So these are, more food safety requirements, basics, things that are going to be in place to prevent potential contamination of these allergens onto other products due to these labeling requirements, and more broadly due to potential allergic reactions from consumers. So these are allergen control programs usually already exist. These aren't something we're asking you to necessarily create. So these would already be in place per FDA requirements on labeling. Can a facility with existing food safety and organic certifications become plant-based certified if we do not handle any animal products? Yes. So we will do a thorough review of your ingredients, if you're to make sure, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of ingredients that can be derived from animal inputs. So we will have to do a thorough review of your inputs that are used in your products. But yes, that the food safety certification will help. Between food safety and organic, you likely are meeting a majority of the requirements, given, with organic, there's segregation requirements, clean out requirements, things in place. You have a system in place, to prevent cross-contamination of unwanted non-organic materials or prohibited substances for organic. And so applying those same principles to your plant-based program will definitely mean you have a leg up for getting certified. I can't promise that you will have to do 0 more things beyond your existing organic and food safety certifications to become plant-based, but given the overlap in requirements, that would definitely work in your favor. Okay, would added sugars be considered plant-based? So this is why we would do this evaluation, is because, as I mentioned before, bone char can be used in filtration of sugars. So we can't say with, blindly that all sugars are plant-based or that all sugars, do contain this bone char as a processing aid. So this is why we would have to do that ingredient evaluation. And the way we would start off doing this is by collecting documentation that you may already have on hand from your supplier, or we have standardized forms your suppliers can complete detailing all of the additives, processing aids, the things that are used in production. Okay, what is the difference between vegan and plant-based? This is a great question. So there are different types of certifications out there. So generally, I can give you kind of an overview. So vegan means that it is not produced from animal-derived inputs. So an overlap between vegan and plant-based is that they do not contain animal-derived inputs. However, vegan doesn't necessarily require that things are plant-based. So for example, a box of baking soda would be eligible to be vegan certified. A box of baking soda, and it's sodium bicarbonate, it's a mineral essentially. It's not derived from anything from animals or anything from plants. It is a non-organic substance. So baking soda would be eligible for a vegan certification, but it would not be eligible for a plant-based certification because it does not meet that 95% threshold. In addition, some but not all vegan certifications do address an animal testing component. Again, it does vary across the vegan certifications. So anything related to animal cruelty, there are also separate certifications for testing on animals to confirm, the absence of animal testing. And that is not included in plant-based certification. And finally, sometimes in vegan certifications, packaging can be in scope. Generally, you're not seeing too many packaging materials that are derived from animals. I would assume maybe like you would be looking at the glue used in the cardboard box or something like that. But that packaging is not in scope in our plant-based certification. We are focused on the product composition and the process and the inputs used to produce this in the supply chain. Why are unprocessed vegetables not eligible for certification? So again, this relates to them not having an alternative in the marketplace that is animal derived. And we really do this because we want our standard to have integrity. We don't want to confuse consumers and we don't want to dilute our standard. It is, I think everyone hopefully knows, that a bunch of carrots, a bag of spinach is going to be derived from plants and it is not derived from animals. And so we want to be very careful and make sure that our standard is providing value and transparency to consumers in a meaningful way, and not just allow the label to be applied to things where it really isn't providing any additional value. We don't want to dilute the claim, and we want to make sure that our standard and our label has integrity. Seeing any more questions coming in. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Ned directly and he would be happy to answer those. And he would also be happy to get you started on plant-based certification or anything else that you'd like to work with within the product claims certification group. And if there's anything at all you're interested at in SCS, feel free to reach out to Ned. He'll either be able to answer your question or direct you to the appropriate person. So thank you everyone for your time and have a great rest of your Wednesday. Bye-bye.